Welcome to the explainer. So, you know that little lock icon in your browser? That's encryption, and it protects, well, pretty much everything in our digital lives. But the story of how we built that lock, one that we could all truly trust, doesn't start with code. Nope. It actually starts with a spectacular, catastrophic failure of steel and concrete. It's an amazing story about learning from the past to secure our future. Yeah, this quote from Professor J.K. Finch, it just nails a really dangerous trap that engineers can fall into. It's this idea that, we're so advanced now, our modern methods make us immune to old problems. But the truth is, a lot of the time we've just forgotten. We've forgotten the hard lessons those problems taught us in the first place. Okay, so what in the world does a twisting, collapsing bridge from 1940 have to do with the super complex math that's protecting your bank account right now? I mean, it sounds crazy, right? But as you're about to see, the answer is everything. It's all about avoiding a huge, catastrophic blind spot. So, let's dive into this tale of two collapses. First, a story of physical engineering that literally fell out of the sky, and then a story of digital engineering that was just about to be cracked wide open. So here it is, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, better known by its nickname, Galloping Gertie. And in 1940, this thing just spectacularly tore itself apart in what was, believe it or not, a pretty light wind, only about 42 miles an hour. So why? Well, it turns out the top engineers of the day had this massive collective blind spot. They got it in their heads that lighter, more elegant bridges were just better. And in the process, they completely forgot some really old, really important lessons about the powerful twisting forces of the wind. All right, let's switch gears and jump into the digital world. Because in the early days of the internet, our data was being held up by its own shaky bridge. It was an encryption standard that was, in its own way, just as wobbly as Galloping Gertie, and just as vulnerable to a powerful, new kind of force. Right, so that standard was called DES, the Data Encryption Standard. And for a long, long time, it was the bedrock of digital security. But that bedrock was definitely starting to crack. And hey, to be fair, DES had an absolutely incredible run. I mean, it was developed by IBM, became a federal standard way back in '76, and it was the workhorse of global security for decades. It was used everywhere, banking, government, you name it. The famous cryptographer Bruce Schneier even said, every standard should have such long, useful life. It really was a big deal. But here's the thing. Remember that wind that took down the bridge? Well, the wind in the digital world is computing power, and it was getting stronger, exponentially stronger. By the late 90s, the once unbreakable DES was looking pretty shaky, and then came the final straw. In 1999, a team publicly cracked a DES key in just 22 hours. That was it. The bridge was officially broken. The world desperately needed a new standard. So, okay, the big question is, how do you build a new standard without making the same mistakes all over again? Well, the folks at the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, that's NIST, they actually learned the lesson from those bridge designers. They decided to try something totally new, something kind of radical, a global, completely open, public competition. Yeah, instead of some secret government group designing the next standard behind closed doors, they just threw the doors wide open. In 1997, they basically put out a call to the entire world, send us your best ideas. And they got them. 15 different candidate algorithms came in from cryptographers in 10 different countries. And that's when the real fun started. For months, the entire global crypto community, all the experts, hackers, and academics, was invited to just go nuts. They were told to analyze, attack, and do their absolute best to break these 15 algorithms. And based on all that public feedback, NIST was able to narrow the field down to just 5 finalists. Then came another round of even more intense scrutiny on those final 5. And finally, a winner was announced. It was an algorithm called Rijnjael, named after its 2 brilliant Belgian inventors. It would soon be renamed the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES. This thing was the sole survivor of a global cryptographic trial by fire. So what is it about AES that's so special? I mean, what's actually going on inside this thing that has made it the undisputed global standard for over 2 decades now? All right, let's pop the hood and take a look. Okay, so at its heart, AES is what we call a symmetric block cipher. Now, let's break that down because it sounds complicated, but it's not. Symmetric just means it uses the exact same secret key to both lock your data up and to unlock it. Simple, right? Just like a physical key. And block cipher means it works on your data in fixed-size chunks or blocks. So instead of scrambling one letter at a time, it's like it puts your message into a bunch of identical little boxes, and then it scrambles the contents of all those boxes. Now, to actually do the scrambling, AES puts each of those blocks of data through a whole bunch of rounds of a really complex process. Think of it like a blender on a crazy setting. In each round, the data gets twisted and turned in 4 different ways. First, it substitutes bytes, kind of like using a secret decoder ring. Then it shifts the rows of data around. After that, it mixes up the columns using some fancy math. And finally, it adds in a little piece of the secret key. Now, imagine doing that over and over and over again. Pretty soon, the original data is completely unrecognizable unless you have that key. And what's really cool is how flexible AES is. See, you can choose different key sizes. A longer key, like 256-bit, means more security. And that's because it puts the data through more of those scrambling rounds. A 128-bit key does 10 rounds, but a 256-bit key does 14. Now, it takes a little more computer horsepower, but get this. Even the base version, AES 128, is for all practical purposes completely unbreakable by any computer that exists today. It's that strong. So yeah, the creation of AES gave us this amazing, super secure encryption algorithm. But honestly, the real legacy here, the most important lesson we learned from that collapsed bridge, was the process itself. And the experts at the time, they totally got how big a deal this was. We're talking about people like Ronald Rivest. I mean, this is the R in RSA encryption, one of the godfathers of modern crypto. He called the adoption of AES a major milestone in the history of cryptography. That's high praise from a legend. And you just can't argue with the success. Since 2001, we've seen thousands upon thousands of validated versions of AES. It is literally everywhere. It's protecting top secret government communications, it's protecting your online banking, it's protecting the data on your phone right now. It is, without a doubt, one of the most successful and widely trusted standards ever created. So here's the real takeaway, the big idea. The AES competition gave us a brand new blueprint for how to build trust in technology. By throwing the whole process open to the public, by being totally transparent, NIST made sure there were no blind spots, right? They learned the lesson of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. They basically invited the entire world to come and try to tear their new digital bridge down before they even finished building it. And that open model worked so well, it's now how we're creating other critical standards, like the ones that are going to protect us from the threat of quantum computers. And that kind of leaves us with this final thought. There is a new, incredibly powerful wind on the horizon, and it's called quantum computing. It's a technology that threatens to break a lot of the encryption we rely on today. But the lesson we learned from Galloping Gertie and the incredible success of the AES process, well, that gives us the blueprint. It shows us that the very best way to build a bridge strong enough to get us to a secure future is to invite the entire world to help you design it.